A reminder to all, the meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. Any exempt private items on the agenda, the live stream will cease prior to the meeting moving into private. There might be a short delay. A recording of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Attendees are required to wear face masks on entry to the building and meeting room, which may be removed when seated. Would members and officers please remember to switch microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone and switch microphones off when finished. Except for the chair because I can't quite reach it. Reporting officers joining using Teams, use the hands up icon on your screen for questions and comments. Please turn your camera and microphone on when speaking and off when finished. Please switch mobile phones off or place on silent mode. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies for absence received from Councillors T. Malik and Councillor Abid, Chair.
And we haven't got the minutes from the last meeting. Right. Chair's update? None. Disclosures of interest? You don't need me to read all that out, do you?
Not, Chair, at the moment.
Urgent business?
No urgent business, Chair.
Reference from committees and other bodies?
No references, Chair.
On to item 7. But before I start, I'm going to explain what actually will happen tonight, because there's been some doubt at exactly what should happen. First of all, I will invite the members who actually called this in to indicate the reason. Sorry, Nicola.
Chair, could you ask Roger Kirk to turn his microphone off? I think it's interfering with your sound. He's on the... Yeah.
Thanks, Nicola. Yes, it is. Right. Right. I'll start again because I got myself a little bit confused anyway. Invite the call-in members to indicate their reasons for calling and hear their issues with the executive decision called in. Then invite OSB members to ask questions and or clarify points with the call-in members or the officers. At the conclusion of the debate, invite OSB to decide which of the 4 call-in actions they wish to take as set out in the report. Call for Councillor Franks.
Yeah, you want me to go first? Fine, that's no problem.
Yourself or David Wynne?
Sorry?
Either yourself or David Wynne.
Yeah. Okay, well, the position as we see it is the first thing I have to say is we are really pleased that the executive has decided to set up these 2 boards. The developments that are being proposed are huge. They are going to have an effect on Luton residents for generations to come, maybe hundreds of years. You cannot overstate the importance of these developments, and getting it right is critical. That's one reason why the project boards are a really, really good idea to try and steer the thing and make it actually happen, rather than to prevaricate for years and years and years, as quite often happens. I think people out there, certainly people that we speak to, are well aware of the importance of developments around the town centre, and well aware that the effect will not just be for the town centre, but for the whole area. There is a need for a good kick to get the place moving again. one of the things that's mentioned quite often is that the last, particularly by people who are old enough to remember, the last development in the town centre on anything like the scale of what's coming was the planning in the late 1960s and development in the early 70s of what was then called the Arndale Centre, what is now the Mall. Now, it's true that for a while, the Mall was a commercial, financial success. It's now viewed as a cultural, architectural and heritage disaster area by most people, and it's not even a financial success anymore, partly because of the rental policy of the owners, whose demand for such gigantic rents that driven out even such giants of the retail sector as Marks and Spencer, a loss to the whole area. And we have to be remembering that much of the early planning and the subsequent development of what was then the Arndale Centre was carried out in private, in secret. The local residents were eventually presented with what was in effect a fait accompli. This is what you're going to get. And to be fair, the protests at the time were few and far between. Most people seemed to think that it was going to give them a nice modern shopping centre and that was something worth having. Those with a little more foresight could see that the fashion at the time for inward-looking developments was something that wasn't going to work, and it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked for all those years. What we see is the need for the boards to conduct their business in a more open way. Inevitably, there will be business that they will need to discuss in private. You can't avoid that. There will be contractual issues, for example. There might be lots of things that they will need to discuss in private, but not all of their business needs to be discussed in private. Neither do they need to report to another body, a joint board, which also meets in private. So in the end, our view is that the project boards are an excellent idea, well worthy of support, very pleased indeed that they're being set up, but they should be more open in the way they do their business. That's my view. No doubt David Wynne will have different views.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. My reasoning is really very straightforward. The council is governed in terms of what can and can't be in private by very specific legislation, in particular Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. That act makes it very clear that the overall overarching requirement is for the council to be as open as possible and as open to public scrutiny as possible, and to be as open to scrutiny by all members of the council as possible. If people require it, I have some extracts which I can quote for you if you don't believe what I've just said, but I can assure you that what I've just said is true. My concern goes on further from that, which is that we're going down a path as a council where more and more of what we do as a council seems to be being held in private. If I can just give examples, a lot of the stuff that is associated with the airport, which is a major asset of ours as a council, is done in private. A lot of what Vauxhall Homes is doing is done in private. A lot of what is done, for example, for Active Newton is done in private. And increasingly, it's the case that the norm has started to become that we as a council do things in private. I think that is a very, very, very dangerous process and path for us to be going down. It is anti-democratic, and I object very strongly to us continuing down that path. This, as David has just said, as my fellow councillor has just said, is an absolutely crucial part of the town centre master plan. Those of you who know the involvement that I've had with the town centre master plan will know that I'm a huge fan of the work that's been done. And if we carry it through, it will be of enormous benefit to this town and to all of its residents. So I also share the view that the project boards are essential. I also recognise, just as that Government Act recognises, that there are times when there are things that will need to be done in private, but the majority do not, and they should be open to public and councillor scrutiny, because don't forget that these proposals don't just stop the general public knowing what's going on, they stop most councillors knowing what's going on, and that is not democratic. That's all I'll say for the moment, Chair.
Hussein.
Chair, can I ask questions?
I was just about to come on to that now.
Sorry?
I was just about to start questions. Anybody, go on, ask your question.
Yeah, number of questions here. The first one really is in terms of the mall being a disaster. I mean, and Councillor Frank, you did say it was a success story in the beginning, but the pandemic was something that had an impact, and I'm sure you'd agree with that. But the big centres like Mall were the thing of the past. People's shopping habits have changed. Do you not agree on that?
Yeah, I agree. And when you say it was a success at the start, it was a financial success at the start, but it still ripped the heart and the heritage history out of the centre of the town. And to be quite honest, these days, although it was recognised at the time that the shopping centre was inadequate, wasn't catering for the population in the way that it should, that could have been rectified without ripping the whole town centre to bits. And that kind of mistake would probably not happen nowadays because attitudes have changed. So yes, when you say it was a success to start with, it was a financial success to start with, but it was already a heritage and a cultural disaster which had yet to be appreciated.
No. The other thing that you said, and you said in that you are in favour of a delivery board, so that if something has been agreed in the public, in this chamber, you know, in terms of the town centre development, that would be the one that you would agree is probably the best way, because it's nice to agree something, but if it's not delivered at the end of the day, even though we got the 20 million levelling up fund, and this will be probably one of the major, and nobody disagrees with you, that this will have a major impact in, you know, hundreds of years to come for the future generation. So we need to have a delivery board which then makes sure that it is delivered.
Agree entirely. Do need a delivery board. Absolutely essential.
Yeah. So where does this is where I'm coming to, because I, for one, just like you, have you know, there is this secret bit of the meeting, other than the confidential commercial meetings. Where is the secret bit which will be decided? Because from my understanding, or have I got that wrong? I'm sure the officers will put me right, is that this delivery board will report to the executive, which is in public and a public document, and will not be in private and not be in secret.
No, I'm sorry, that's not so. Not so. The executive report makes it perfectly clear that the board will report to joint board, which is executive members and senior officers meeting in private.
Can I check? I think, Nicola, but before I ask the next.
Can I just stop both of you for a minute, please? Nicola, can you give any
Can I
clarification?
come in? Because I think there's some technical issues I think we need to kind of just clarify.
Please.
So when we set these up and put them into the report, the advice we were given as officers was that these two boards had to be established as executive advisory bodies because they were chaired by elected members who were democratically elected, and the idea was that they would feed into the council's executive. They weren't set up as executive subcommittees because that would restrict what could be done in those committees. The advice was to set them up as executive advisory boards. The reference in the stage terms of reference to joint board is an absolute mistake and shouldn't have been in. That's an oversight. What that does say is that the accountable body on that particular board is the executive. And indeed, with the Town Centre Strategic Board, which is slightly different because actually that includes a much bigger group of stakeholders from the private sector, the police, others in the commercial sector, government. That's a slightly different beast, but the intention is it would be chaired by an elected member. So in terms of the notion of them being secret, I think the point is that they are feeding into the council's executive, which that meeting isn't in secret. So I think that was the point I wanted to make. I think the other point is that scrutiny plays a role in all of this. So actually there is an opportunity with kind of both of these bodies for them to request a regular report into scrutiny. I think that's fair. I think that's right. I think there is nothing secret with that, and like we've done on town centre issues before. So I think that is something that we need to consider. The other point about the wider members of the public, the thing that the report doesn't say this, but what we have established as part of the town centre work is a stakeholder group, a much bigger network forum. So we can have regular conversations with a much broader section of the community and kind of other stakeholders. So actually that we're feeding in there as well. So I suppose what I'm trying to say, Chair, is that technically we've been told to set them up as executive advisory bodies. The report tries to address that. That does restrict kind of how they are set up. However, there are mechanisms within the system through the executive, through scrutiny and through the stakeholder group that I just talked about, where we can actually broaden that conversation.
I'll just respond to that very. I won't take much of your time, but yes, that's a. Thank you very much, Nicola. It's a very, very partial description that you've given us. I'm not surprised to hear that, but that's what it is. The terms of reference absolutely clear that the Bute Street Project Board, the Stage Project Board, as I believe it's called, will report to Joint Board. That's what it says. That's the terms of reference, and that's reporting as a secret body, reporting to another body that meets in secret. Completely unacceptable.
I know, but I'm trying to resolve this thing. There's David, then yourself. I'm trying to resolve this point first before you ask your questions. So bear with me. Both your names are down. Yes, Councillor Wynne.
I want to just come back because what you've just said now effectively is saying this report is totally incorrect you've said that it will have an entirely different outlook. It will have an entirely different structure. All I would say is that, quite honestly, this committee should be turning round and saying, go away, produce a report that we can actually see and understand, because this one, frankly, deserves to go in the bin.
Yes, Nicola.
So I think that's rather harsh, because actually what the report seeks to do is establish two bits of governance which we are required to move the. It is I agree, it is partial, but that wasn't the purpose of the report. The purpose of the report was just to establish two governance structures that have been advised by the monitoring officer, and that's exactly what the report does. And there is a mistake in the report, Councillor Franks. I've said that twice now. There's a mistake that needs to be corrected in the stage terms of reference. It should not say joint board, it should say the executive. I'll be really clear about that. It is a mistake, an officer mistake.
Chair, but the error that's in the report is so fundamental that it changes the total report.
Can I just stop everyone? If, as Nicola says, there is a genuine mistake, and it is minuted that it is a genuine mistake and that it should not say joint board, and that is minuted for everyone to see, and remember, this is a public meeting, I think, in fairness, we have got to accept it. I know this has gone to exec and they haven't picked this one up, but we have, and I thank the pair of you that we have. But I think by minuting it, that should be what we do this evening. Does everybody agree?
Not at all, because it doesn't deal with the fact that the meetings are going to be held in secret and the minutes will be secret. I think we should hear what these people want to say.
No. Yes.
Chair, can I just put it for the record? There are other members, and I think we need to be given an equal opportunity to speak, which unfortunately hasn't happened, and sometimes it doesn't. For my 2 pennies worth here, firstly, my understanding is that, I mean, I've read through the papers, that these are mere advisory bodies that will be dealing with the direction and making sure that, execution takes place of the plans. Firstly, my question is to Councillor Franks. What does he exactly mean by the town centre, or the mall, I suppose, or the Arndale Centre being a cultural disaster? Because obviously, the demographics of the town changes, and we have now a perfect opportunity with the Beat Street levying up money that we've been given for something, extraordinary for our future generations to come. Second of all, thank you very much, Officer, for the clarification. I support and I completely agree with my colleague, Councillor Hussain, that we do need to put this to a vote, because I do believe that this is a genuine mistake. If it is a genuine mistake, then obviously the other points go away, because as far as my understanding is concerned, and I'm happy to be corrected by senior colleagues here, that these meetings, the executive meetings, they do meet in public. So I mean, they're not private meetings. Thank you.
Councillor Aggley, what was your?
Chair, I just trying to clarify what Councillor Frank said. He said the previous meetings and outcomes was presented in terms of the mall as fait accompli. Do you believe this is going to be the same? Is that what you're thinking? That's my question number one. The question number two, I also had the joint board, but I believed, as far as I'm aware, the joint board doesn't make decisions. That's my understanding. I may be wrong, but as far as I've been in this council, I've been told the joint board doesn't make decisions. we elected officers make decisions. That's number two. Your question about being in private, you've admitted that, yes, there's a need for the board, and the board made some things will be commercially sensitive and shouldn't be in public. So my question to you is, are you asking for the meeting to be a public meeting, or you're asking the meeting to be held in public, where anybody can come and sit in the gallery and listen to what goes on? Because at the end of the day, we have councillors and others who can come here and have to listen to whatever the executive are talking about. So I'm not sure in my mind what you're asking for, whether you're asking for a public meeting or a meeting held in public. If you can clarify that. Or the fourth question is, do you think there's not enough scrutiny with these issues? I think that's what is playing on our mind. I'm still don't see when you're saying it's held in private, it's a private meeting, everything is private. I don't understand. You can ask to see the minutes. Is that not possible? Is that what you're saying? When the minutes are out, you can't see the minutes? I'm just trying to clarify why you call this in, because I'm still struggling. So if you can answer those questions, because it's been clarified that it's a mistake that they said the joint board don't make decisions. Thank you, Chair.
I'll try and answer those questions as far as I can remember what they really are. First of all, do I believe that residents are going to be presented with a fait accompli in much the same way as they were over the Arndale Centre come Mal? I don't know. I don't know that. All I can say is that with all of the planning and implementation being behind closed doors, the possibility of that happening is massively increased. I don't know whether it will happen or not. Nobody does. Haven't got a crystal ball. Joint board doesn't make decisions. No, it doesn't. But that's a bit irrelevant now, since Nicola has told us there's not going to report to joint board. So that doesn't. I mean, in terms of answering the question anyway, joint board clearly does give senior officers direction. That's what it's for. So although it doesn't formally make decisions, it does give direction to senior officers. But it's an irrelevance in the sense that Nicola has now assured us that neither of these boards will actually report there. Do I have access to the minutes? No. No non-executive member has any legal right to see the documents that are going to private meetings until after the meeting has taken place. And even then, access is somewhat limited. There is a practice here that the Leader of the Opposition actually gets the yellow pages at the same time as executive members do. That's a practice that's been followed since the Liberal Democrats took over as the administration back in 2003, when we made the documents available to the then leader of the Labour opposition group, at the same time giving them the right to speak at executive meetings. That's a practice which was continued when the Labour group took over in, was it 2007? But it's a custom and practice locally. It has somewhat dubious legal grounds, although yes, we would be able to see the documents after the event. Do I want a public meeting? No. No. That is not the way to get progress made, either quickly or slowly or at all. What we do want is for the meetings to be held in public. That does not mean, that is absolutely not the same as a public meeting. This is a meeting being held to which members of the public have access. Angela may be able to tell us whether in fact anyone's tuned in, I don't know. But the fact is it is not a public meeting. a public meeting would be most unlikely to produce the results that we all, I think, jointly want. I have drafted something which I now formally move, and I'm sure one of my colleagues will second it.
Yeah,
Are you seconding it?
I'll second it, but I want to ask to say something.
Good. Can I circulate what I have moved and Peter Chapman has seconded?
I haven't finished. I need to come back on. Yeah, I'm just talking to Chair.
Still on question. Still on question.
If David, if you read that, it might explain where David is coming from, that proposal.
Just.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy for the debate to continue, and if anyone have questions, we'll do our best to answer them. Whether they relate to the motion which I've now moved and Peter has seconded, or whatever. But I have no interest in stifling debate. I'm quite happy to carry on.
My question to you, I think, in my mind, still haven't answered, and you've ducked the question. You don't want a public meeting. You've admitted to that. Do you want a meeting held in public? The meetings will be held in public. Is that your understanding too?
Answer very specifically. Yes, it should be a meeting in public. Under the Local Government Act, at any meeting in public, the chair may decide to take any items that the chair wishes in private. That's what the Local Government Act says. That's what happens in lots of our meetings, and that's the way this should be operating. And if I am able to say so, had we not called this item in, then we would not have heard, frankly, about the error that's in the report that makes the report actually, had it gone through unchallenged, would have been extremely detrimental to the public visibility of this council because of the error that the report contained.
For us, really, for the members who call in a decision, it is up to this committee to ask the question for their reason for their calling, which is what we are going through, Madam Chair, is the process. So let's finish the process, and then we can put all the anything proposals afterwards. At this stage, we're asking the people that have asked for, not you asking us the question, is us asking you the question, those that have called in the decision, which is the proper process of called in decision, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hussain, may I say that I didn't ask you a question?
No, you asked my colleague a question, and that's not what that.
Can we please?
So again, executive meets in public, but it's not public meeting. So both questions you're asking for already does happen. You don't want a public meeting, and you want a meeting held in public. The board, delivery board, goes to report to the executive, and they make the decisions. Their decisions are held in public. What is your argument? I still can't get my head around it.
Argument is that the board meets in secret and sends reports to the executive, which the executive may consider with members of the public present, or may decide that it needs to consider in private. And there may be very good reasons why it has to be considered in private. Certainly there are contractual issues and some financial issues which will need to be dealt with in private. But the essential ingredient in what we're asking for is that the meetings of the boards should be held in public with business taken in private where there is a good and legal reason for that to happen. No problem with that at all. Although, if talking of, I haven't raised the issue of public meetings, but David Agberley has, I would have to say that there may be circumstances in which one of the boards may decide that they think there should be a public meeting, in which case they can organise one. But it's no suggestion that their routine meetings should be public meetings. They should be meetings to which the public have access in the same way that all other council meetings operate. Every council meeting, every executive meeting is open to members of the public to attend, but they are not public meetings.
Yes, Councillor C.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm actually still confused, to be honest. I know you've done your best, Councillor Franks, to explain it, but I am still confused. Firstly, as to why this has been called in. And second of all, we've been provided with clarifications by the officer, so I'm still confused. I mean, I guess my basic question is, these are mere advisory boards. They're not decision-making bodies. That's what my understanding is. And the ultimate decision maker in this, I think please do correct me, Nicola, is the executive, which is the decision-making body. And those meetings, as far as I'm concerned, again, I'm going to come back to my senior colleagues who have been in the council a long time, much more longer than I have. As far as I'm aware, that those meetings are actually held in public, as in obviously the members of the public can view proceedings and so on, unless there are commercially sensitive information and decisions that need to be made, which are obviously held in private. So I am still confused as to the purpose of the call-in. Still confused. So sorry.
Councillor Chapman.
Would the proposer this motion, or the people that call the call-in, my understanding is the objection is, why should the boards meet totally in private when all of our other council meetings work on the basis of part of the meeting is in public, because we want the maximum access of the public to know what we discuss. We don't want it in private. And then if in any of our meetings that we have at the moment, if something of a sensitive nature comes up, it goes into private. That means that the majority of the discussion on how the decisions come about, not just making the decisions, but how the decisions come about, are the public can see what the discussion was. And the fear is that the last time the decisions were made about the town centre, they again were made totally, the last time the discussions about the future of the town were made, they again were made totally in private. So why are we throwing away the tradition of this council, which is to try and let the public hear as much of our discussion as possible, of having meetings, the majority of which are in public, to discuss what our strategy is and where we want to go, and then anything that's commercially sensitive, the meeting goes into private. Is that the right understanding?
Yes.
Javira, has that solved your issue? Because I was, well, the way I see it is Councillor Franks and Councillor Wynne, and they can correct me immediately if I'm wrong, is they've called this in because the decision shows that both these boards meet fully in private, ignoring the other issue that's now been cleared up, because that's done. So the reason they called it in was partially that, which is done, partially that both these boards meet in private. Unlike this board, or the executive, or full council, or health and social care, or any other meeting this council has. And no, we don't see any reason why that should be the case. or they do, and I would agree with that. So the reason to call it in is to try and see if there's any way we can get these meetings held in a way that is more in line with every other piece of business that is done by this council. Am I correct?
Yes.
That they are council bodies. However, the Town Centre Strategic Board is a much bigger body. But because we have elected members on both bodies, the advice that we have been given is that they should be set up as executive advisory bodies because both boards will be chaired by elected members. So that's the advice. And I think that's kind of there is some technical issues here that I think we need to seek some clarity from the monitoring officer because they're not set up as subcommittees of the executive, which would be fully in public. They are set up as executive advisory bodies so that they can meet, they can do business, technical business, and they can report into the executive in public. That's how we've been advised to set them up. So I think that is kind of some of the issue there that I think we need to resolve. They are not subcommittees of the executive. They are executive advisory bodies. There is a difference because they've got elected members on them, both chaired by elected members. They've got officers on them, and they will have partners from government and from elsewhere. So the way to do that is through it being an executive advisory body, I am told.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, for my, again, 2 pennies worth, I mean, I think it probably will be important, and for our purposes, I think we do need to see that additional bit of technical information to be able to fully make a decision, for starters. Second of all, it was the thing about what you said earlier, Nicola, was about if, for instance, the scrutiny board, as in us, wanted to see any of those decisions, information, whatever, from these advisory boards, we will be able to call those in. Is that correct, or have I misunderstood that? From those boards or not?
I believe you would do that through the executive.
Okay.
But
okay.
I don't believe there is anything to stop
Okay.
The chair or members of this group asking for items coming forward, a progress report, for example, or anything that you feel that you need to be updated on, asking that. But we're not at that place yet, are we? But I think I cannot see a reason why we would not be totally transparent about that. It's absolutely the right thing to do.
Okay. Well, I wasn't around in the 60s, but I think going forward, I completely appreciate, what colleagues are concerned about and so on. I'm trying to understand, obviously the reason why the decision has been called in. But I think what, obviously the technical information that will be provided with the monitoring officer, and also the fact that, the officers just told us that if we wanted to call any of those decisions in, if we wanted any further information of what the boards have been doing, etc., we can technically call those in. So there is, so for me, as far as I'm concerned, there is no secrecy here. I mean, transparency seems as though they will be there.
That Nicola believes, and what Councillor Franks is trying to do tonight with the report that we've got, make it transparent. Because fair enough, down the line, we might be able, as OSB, to call for reports, but we're not 100%.
But that's what she said, but that's what her understanding is. But she will go away and find out from the technical officer. So,
what you're saying, Nicola, what I'm saying is, if I sit here, I want facts to say this is what will happen. And unfortunately tonight, we've got a mistake and it changes the outcome of the report tonight. There was a genuine mistake, but it wasn't picked up at executive. We have tonight. And I'm just concerned how we sort of take this forward.
Chair, may I suggest then that there is a referral back to executive for all the reasons that you've just kind of outlined, and we kind of go back on those points and get them further clarified.
Chair, I have moved and Peter Chapman has seconded a reference back to the executive. It's there on the table.
Right, I've got Councillor Hussain and Councillor Ackley.
Yeah, I think one thing we do, and everybody accepted that there was a mistake, so we accepted that, so we need to move on from there. Second thing is, I think every member of this committee understand what the legislation is and when it should be in the private. So please, not try to, to teach us some of the tricks. Some of us have been around, not as long as Councillor Frank, but we have been around, and we do understand the legislation. So commercially sensitive decision will be taken into. I would move a counter proposal that in light of all the questions that have been asked, that it goes back to the executive to answer those questions, and then if there is, and more importantly, I think for the scrutiny to be able to have a proper decision-making process, in my understanding, is that all matters that are a public interest do go to the scrutiny first before they go to the executive. That is the process in the Constitution, and as such, it should be done in every case. If it isn't, then I'm the first one that will be making a huge noise about it. So it will be, unless it's commercially sensitive, it should come here first and before it goes to the executive. That is the process that I am, from the executive scrutiny, somebody who was a chair of scrutiny way back in 2000, understood it, that it must come to the scrutiny before it goes to the executive, and that's what my understanding, it still does. If it is not, then I'm the first to start screaming about it and say, no, that's not.
I will come to you in a minute, but Councillor Ackley.
So I put a counter proposal, and that has to
So,
be also. Is that seconded?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay.
Councillor Frank and Councillor Wing, you've admitted you don't want a public meeting. Either the meetings are public or not. So you don't want a public meeting. That has been agreed. You have accepted that. The only thing now left is the meetings held in public by the executive, which is done. The meetings are held in public. The boards are advisory boards to the executive, and the executive can decide to ditch the advice given to them by the board. So you still haven't admitted to the public, as we said, that you're not asking for a public meeting. As far as I can see, this is shown to the public. That's all you're asking for, to show the public that you're doing something which in actually
David.
This advisory group is just to the executive, which holds their meeting in public. You're not asking for a public meeting.
David.
May I answer David Agbley's question? It seems that he's having some difficulty in understanding the difference between a public meeting and a committee meeting which is held in public.
No, I understand.
I'm sorry. I've tried my best to explain.
No, you haven't.
I've tried my best to explain the difference. If it hasn't sunk in, well, I'm sorry. I can't do any more. I have tried. On the question, and I think this is quite important, actually. I can't remember whether it was Nicola Monk who said it now, but somebody did, that the question of the stage board reporting to joint board was not picked up at executive. It was. I raised it at executive because the executive very generously always allow me to make a contribution, and I respect their allowing me to do that by keeping my contributions brief and trying not to hog the meeting. But I did raise it, and I raised it as a concern, and it was brushed aside. So it isn't fair, Nicola, to say that it wasn't picked up at the executive. It was picked up, it was picked up by me, and it was brushed aside. I just want to, for the final time, I hope, to remind you, Chair, that you have before you a motion which has been moved and seconded, and which I think we should discuss and vote upon. And when that's been disposed of, I'm very happy, if you wish to do so, to take a further motion from Councillor Hussain. Perfectly happy to debate that as well. But the one you've got on the table now has to be dealt with first.
Nicola, is it?
It's to do with Councillor Franks's motion, so it's relevant just before we run through that it talks about planning in the 1960s and it talks about the development and things happening there, not in public, but just to remind members that the stage will have to go through a full planning process and full consultation, public consultation, as members would expect. So kind of likening it to the 1960s would kind of not be appropriate.
I must respond to that because it's entirely appropriate. I would expect the stage and the strategic board, any actual development that results from their deliberations will of course have to go through the planning process, will of course have to be subject to the usual planning consultations. And so did anything that came from the Arndale Centre planning and development back in the late 60s and early 70s. It all had to go through the planning process. What wasn't public, and what we're saying should be public, is the deliberation in the process of developing the ideas. That's all we're saying.
Chair.
Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, I would ask my colleague to oppose this, what is being proposed by Councillor Franks.
We're not quite there, Councillor Hussain.
I've moved it. Peter Chapman has seconded it. I believe as seconder he actually wants to speak to it.
Yes. Councillor Chapman.
point of order. The point of order is, I think Councillor Chapman is, in terms of this motion as is seconded, is proposing something completely different that is not the current practice. You are saying now that advisory board meetings should be a public meeting and minutes published.
So there are three types of meetings. There are public meetings, there are private meetings, and there are our normal meetings, which are held in public. The public doesn't speak. It's not a public meeting. It's a meeting held in public, which can, if necessary, go into private. But those middle type of meetings are driven by the principle as much as possible should be held in public. It's not a public meeting. It's a meeting of this council that the public can observe.
Speaking to this motion, as you put it, as you know, you're asking for the advisory board meeting should be held in public, but that's not the current practice in our constitution.
Why not?
No, I'm not saying if you want that, you put a motion that the constitution should be changed, then advisory board's meeting can be held in public.
How can it not be in our
change the constitution?
We hold all our meetings like that now.
No, is it in the constitution or not?
It's not. It's in the. We're holding a meeting now.
No. This is in the constitution. What you're asking for is not in the constitution.
Councillor,
if that's what you want, what you need to do
if
is
you
to
want
change
to
the
challenge the
constitution.
motion, you want to challenge the motion. Challenge it with your legal advice. This motion can be put. I'm quite happy with it. It says exactly what I want it to say. It explains exactly how I feel, and I'm quite happy to second it.
And I'm happy to speak to the motion, and I'm saying the motion you've currently put forward, that advisory board meetings should be a public meeting, is not in the current constitution.
How many times do we have to say it's not a public meeting? It's a meeting in public.
Down, Peter.
For God's sake.
There is two public meetings. There is the one where the public can speak.
Yes.
But all of our council meetings are meetings held in public. And this is what...
That's fine, Chair. My question was, this is advisory board to the executive. That's not nothing to do with the council. Yes.
The Constitution does not say that advisory boards have to be held fully in private. It doesn't say that.
If you want the Constitution,
we don't want to change the Constitution.
You put a motion for the Constitution to be changed. But what you're saying is not constitutional.
Can we put the motion?
Yes.
But before we go, can you give us clarification that we can actually ask for an advisory board? Do you know, Nicola, what the answer would be?
I think we need some further advice from the monitoring officer, because as I understand it, an executive advisory board isn't a meeting in public. Isn't a meeting in public. That's what I understand. So actually, I think it's a technical point, but it's an important point. An executive subcommittee is a meeting in public, but an executive advisory board isn't. And we were advised to set these up as executive advisory boards. There is a difference, Chair.
Right. Can we vote on this? Oh, I've lost the vote. Yes. Can we vote on it, please? I think we've gone round in circles. We've discussed it. So, as I say, I think we should vote on this proposal. Those who are for... Roll call.
So we're just going to take a vote on the motion moved by Councillor Franks and seconded by Councillor Peter Chapman. And then I think, Chair, once we've done that, we can move to the motion made by Councillor M. Hussain, and then we can do the same. Okay. So for those in favour of the motion moved by Councillor Franks, I'm just going to read out the names. Councillor Adbley,
Against.
Councillor Peter Chapman, Councillor Franks,
For.
Councillor M. Hussein,
Against.
Against.
For.
Councillor Nichols,
Against.
Councillor Wade,
For.
and Councillor Pedersen.
For.
Casting vote at this point.
Yes, I will. For. All.
Do we need to move to the next? Angela, do we need to move to the next motion?
Councillor Hussain.
My motion is simply to note the scrutiny's concern and take it back to the executive with all the concern that the members have shown and reconsider the decision that they've made. And that's what I'm asking, because there are many questions that have been asked, and also that clarification, if I can make it very clear, against the advice of the officer saying that the committee advisory board is not a committee of the council, yeah, and therefore it does not need to be in public. And that was the advice that was given. All council's committees under the constitution are held in public. So that is the difference compared to the advisory. So if members want to do that, they can, and executive have a powers to take a note of it and completely say, no, we're not.
Can I ask Councillor Hussain, could we have clarification of the technicalities that we've asked tonight? Could we ask, can somebody tell me if we can do that? Because I think there's quite a few technicalities that, no disrespect to you, Nicola, you were, no, but you were saying, I believe. And I think, really and truthfully, if we'd known for certain, we might have had a different outcome from tonight. So I was just going to say, if you could add that on to what you're proposing, I would feel, not sure how everybody else feels.
There's nothing wrong with what Councillor Hussain is proposing, except that it's non-specific. The difference between what he's proposing and what we have already agreed, I remind you, it has already been passed, is that he is asking the executive to reconsider the decision that they've made, but not giving them any advice about what the Overview and Scrutiny Board thinks the decision should look like. Whereas the decision that we've already made gives clear advice to the executive on how we think the decision should look. That's I don't understand where Councillor Hussain's motion is actually leading, because he is asking that they reconsider the decision, which is exactly what we're asking, except the motion that we have already agreed actually gives the executive some clear guidance on how we think the decision should look. I remind you, it has already been agreed.
Clarify that.
Can I take my
All
point
I'm
of order
saying
first?
is to note the decision
Can I
and
take my point of
reconsider,
order first?
which is not in technical terms trying to negate this,
Yeah.
but simply, and all those issues that have been raised, answer them in terms of that, and some of the things that were discussed in that, all the issues, then those need to be taken into account. And this does not, the advice of the board can be noted and executive to do nothing. All I'm asking is not just note, but also to take into consideration in tonight's technical as well as other debate. And is it constitutional if they agree?
Could I just get clarification on exactly what's been proposed and what we're going to be asked to vote for?
Chair, point of order.
If we
You
are
have to
being,
take the point of order.
If-
That's what you do. You take point of order and then debates continue. It's like the debate is continuing and you haven't taken my point of order. Thank you, Chair. The point of order is we've just passed Council Chapman and Frank's motion as it is. There's another motion on the floor. I think Councillor Franks is trying to blend the two. Let's take the motion that has been put on the floor to the executive. That's a different motion. It's not saying the same motion should be incorporated. I think that's a separate motion.
I think, Chair, sorry, members. Chair, can I just quickly come in? If you go to the proposals, if you go to page 6 of the report and you go to the proposals, options open to the committee, and you look at option 2. Option 2 says refer the coding decision back to the executive for reconsideration and make recommendation that the executive amend the code in decision in some way. I just feel that Councillor Franks has made that motion and that clearly comes under this option for the committee. But what I can see also is that you are asking that something goes to executive, but both of those motions actually come under option 2. So what would you agree?
All I'm asking is for complete and utter clarity on exactly what I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with Councillor Hussain's motion. I'm sure it's perfectly in order and within all of the rules. I just want to understand what it is. Can I ask, are we being asked to vote on a motion which says that we note, that we advise the executive that they should note the concerns expressed at OSB and reconsider the decision they've made? Full stop. Because if that's what's being proposed, I'll vote for it, no problem. But I need to understand exactly what it is that's being proposed. If it is that executive be asked to note the concerns expressed at OSB and reconsider the decision they've made, then I'll vote for that, no problem.
No, I'm not, no. Chair,
Can I ask a question? We had to answer questions,
Yes,
so I can ask a question of you, right? Let me finish the question and then give your answer, because it'll affect the way I vote, right? Are you saying that you want the council to reconsider the technicalities because you think that the boards, as much as possible, should meet in public?
very, very clear. The motion you proposed is already been carried because there was a majority. We opposed it, I opposed it.
So can I just clarify? No, you said to clarify.
So can I-
You did with David.
Did
So
I
you're
interrupt-
saying
Chair, did
don't-
I interrupt him?
Well, I'll ask again in a moment.
Right? That really stays as it is because you've already passed that. Mine is, but three in one liner, Councillor Frank and I agree because there were a number of issues were raised, reconsidering the decision as well as all those technicalities that have been said, that it's not a committee meeting, therefore shouldn't be. There are other things that were discussed, and all I'm saying is send it back to them, reconsider in light of the discussion we've had. That's all I'm saying, is not really elaborating any more than that. You pass this, and it will go as it is, right? So nobody now, there's no point us now, having a debate about it, because that's gone through. Yeah, why would we want to, yeah, okay.
My understanding is what our motion was, it's passed, so that will go back to the executive, that, and what you are now doing, what I wanted to do was clarify the technicalities and the other issues that have been brought up this evening. Now, is everybody happy with that? Well, this is why I'm trying to clarify. Does everybody understand what I am saying, and are you in agreement?
Well, yeah.
I entirely agree with what Councillor Hussain has said, but on one condition which I think needs to be added, which is that given what happened last time at executive, that when it has been reconsidered, it should come back to this committee.
Yes, I think it should. I know
It's a called-in decision. It's been called in once, and it can't be called in again. This has been called in once. It's been discussed. It's going back to the executive.
Right.
And I think that's going to be it.
But, Chair, we can't go into perpetual calling.
No.
Round and round in circles.
Right.
But provided we have absolute clarity that what we're asked to vote for now is that executive be asked to note the concerns expressed at OSB and to reconsider the decision they've made. If that's exactly what we're being asked to vote for, then I'll vote for it. I don't have a problem.
You don't want to be more specific in that, saying about technicalities. What Council is saying was actually adding sort of specific things that we were concerned about. The technical stuff.
Well, excuse me, but Councillor Hussain's motion doesn't mention technical issues.
Yes.
It says that executive be asked to note the concerns of OSB and reconsider the decision they've made. Full stop. I'll vote for that.
It covers all the issues we've discussed. That's all I'm saying. We have discussed them, and they're all in the minutes.
Chair, can I just clarify whether Councillor Franks is now withdrawing his decision?
No.
His motion.
If we agree to Councillor Hussain's motion, then both will go to the executive. No problem.
How does
I know, I'm just about.
No, that can happen. That's not a problem. I think going back to the chair, what the chair just said, I think what you were saying, Councillor Pedeston, around seeking clarity on the role of the executive advisory group in terms of kind of remit and role. I think that's what the point you were getting at, because I think that's the nub of this issue. Actually, if we're really clear, it's the nub of the issue. It's whether it's an executive advisory group that doesn't meet in public and isn't open to the public, because that's how it's constituted, but actually advises the executive, which is in public, versus a subcommittee, which this isn't, we're not proposing, which is a in public meeting. So that, I think that's the issue. And I think the point that I was raising right at the beginning is that the advice that we have received in developing this report was that these should be constituted as executive advisory groups for the purposes of the business that they needed to run through. And I think we need to somehow go back to the executive to seek clarity through the monitoring officer on those points, because I think that then helps all members in the chamber tonight.
That question is not part of either the motion that we have already passed, nor is it any part of the motion that Councillor Hussain has proposed.
Yeah, all we're trying to be is helpful to all of our colleagues, regardless of making it any political points. All we're trying to do is to say, not going to the executive and simply executive saying to the overview and scrutiny board, we have noted and that's it, and then vote on it. That will ignore everything what we discussed this evening. I would like them to take a serious consideration what has been, discussed tonight, and they can then take into account and then decide if they want to ignore any recommendation, this recommendation, if they decide to say no, and that's the end of it, right? And you know that, David, and I know that. So I am saying that these issues will still continue, and they should take everything what's been discussed. They see the minute. It's not a motion. It's a minute. Take a note and take the concern of all of us, right? Reconsider if they can amend anything in the executive decision. That would be helpful to us. Otherwise, our debate is completely waste of time. And really, I would like us, we are accountable to the public. We're a public servant, and we are, we work for you. And that's what we must not forget. And that goes for the executive too.
Right.
Could I suggest that the committee administrator reads out exactly what we're being asked to vote for, and we then take a vote? I may then have a further proposal to put forward.
What was it?
Sorry, Chair, I don't think I can do that because there's been a different, motions
Well,
put
exactly.
to this committee tonight. And
then you can't ask us to, if the committee administrator doesn't know what we're being asked to vote on, then how on earth are we supposed to vote on it? For the fourth time, my understanding of what we're being asked to vote on is that the executive be asked to note the concerns expressed at Overview and Scrutiny Board and to reconsider the decision they have made. Boom.
Right. Does everybody... Yeah. Yes, please. Can we vote, please? I'd like to get home before sometime tonight.
so, Chair, is this in addition to the motion already moved by Councillor Franks?
Yes.
Okay.
It is, so that if this is passed, then both motions go to the executive.
Can we do a vote, please, Eunice?
Starting with
4.
4.
4.
4.
4.
4.
For
Oh, I know.
So that motion is agreed, Chair.
Right, thank you.
I
Motion-
would like to propose one further motion, and that is in relation to the programme of this board's future meetings, and it's that the regular reports of both of these boards intended for the executive come to OSB before they go to executive.
Finished?
Yes.
Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm glad we've got consensus in the end. Thank you very much.